Welcome to First Christian Church today, everybody. My name's Randy Barnhart. I'm the senior pastor here. We have guests, and we're really delighted that you're with us. And I don't want you to get the wrong idea about our church. This is First Christian Church, and we're going to take up a second offering. And that might be you think, well, that's all that pastor does is take up offerings. Well, today we're taking up a second. It's a special offering today, Heart for the House, and we're wanting to address some needs that our church has above and beyond our regular tithes and offerings, which we did a few minutes ago. We're going to actually pass the plate here in a little bit at the end of this service for a Heart for the House. And I really don't want you to think that we do this very often. I think we've done it like once or twice before, a special offering on a Sunday morning in addition to our regular offering. So, don't think that's not what we do all the time. Have you ever been walking through a crowd, maybe a ball game, the mall, walking down the hall at school, something like that? You're in a crowd of people, and you hear somebody calling your name. You ever done that? Yeah, everybody probably has. You hear somebody calling your name. Nothing makes you stop, turn, and look quite like hearing your own name called. I was at Turner Field a few years back, and it took the boys, actually it was a lot of years back now, come to think of it, but they were little guys, and we took them to Braves games. We did a lot in those days, and I was heading back to the seats with a couple of big drinks and some popcorn, stuff like that, and I'm walking back to the seat. All of a sudden I hear my name, Randy. Hey, Randy. I stop and turn around and look, and I see these two gorgeous young women, it's a true story, who are looking at me, and they're smiling and waving, all excited and friendly and everything. And I didn't recognize them, so I sort of semi-smiled and waved with alligator arms, like this. I didn't want to fully commit, and I really didn't know who they were. They smiled all the bigger, and they're like going, Randy, and so by this time, it took all of about 10 seconds. I was all in, so I decided to walk over there and speak to them. And it would have been rude for me not to do that. So I'm walking over towards these women, closing the distance between me and them, and I'm smiling big and happy, and they're smiling big and happy, and then all of a sudden they notice me. And they give me this look like, what do you want? Seriously, it was like, don't get too close kind of thing. And it was horrible. They called my name. I'm walking towards them, and they don't want to have anything to do with me. Instantly, three things became clear to me. One, I'm not the only guy in the world named Randy. Go figure. Two, at least one of the other Randys was somewhere behind me. And three, it was his name they called, not my name they called. Psychologists tell us that you will experience a really unique brain activation when you hear your own name called. You hear your own name called. Libby. You do, right? It's a unique thing, You hear your name, Tony. You hear your name, right? We all do. Stanley. You're here. It's good. Came to church. I'm just kidding you, buddy. He's here every week. I'm just teasing. Our brains are triggered when we hear our own names, and we respond in an amazing way, even in a state where you can't respond to anything else. Those who study the brain and its activities say you will respond to your own name. What could be more powerful than that? To hear your name. We're launching a 3-week series today we're calling Love Has a Name. And to open this series, I want to look at Luke 19. It's an event from the life of Jesus where he has this encounter with a man who heard his name called and then saw his life change. Luke 19, 1 through 10. Well, you can look up in your Bibles, your device, whatever. We'll have it on the screen if you prefer to go that route. And we'll read this story from the Gospel of Luke. And it goes like this. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. Remember that, chief tax collector. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he couldn't see over the crowd, so he ran ahead, climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, he's gone to be the guest of a sinner. But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I've cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount. Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. Don't you just love that story? I mean, I just love this thing. I've loved it since I was a little kid. As much as any story I know in the Bible outside the actual story of Jesus' death and resurrection at the end of the Gospels, outside of any other story, it captures the essence of the gospel. And I want us to look at what God's saying to us in this story, what God wants to do to us and through us with this story. Now, here's what jumps off the page at me right away. First thing that I see is this. God hasn't given up on you even if everybody else has. I want you to remember this. God hasn't given up on you even if everybody else in your family and your life has completely written you off. God hasn't done it. Zacchaeus, by the way, let's just admit it, this dude was beyond saving. He had gone way too far. He spit in the face of his own people, served as a tax collector for the Roman government. And, you know, tax collectors, they were these bullies who, with the threat of a Roman sword behind them, they would collect more than they needed to pay the Romans, and the Romans understood they were going to do that and let them do it, and they got to keep the difference. Whatever you owed the Romans in tax, they would take more and pocket the rest. These guys were super wealthy, and Zacchaeus wasn't just a tax collector. He was the boss of the tax collectors, which meant that in their little pyramid scheme, all the other tax collectors had to kick up to him. And he amassed a huge fortune. He was quite literally a traitor and a thief. He stole from poor people and built his life on their backs. He was easily the most hated man in the whole city. Jesus is passing through. Zacchaeus wanted to see him, too short, ran ahead, climbed a tree. You know, Zacchaeus was a wee little man, and a wee little man was he. But what I want you to see is this. Before we go on the rest of the story, I want to pause. I think Luke means something more than the literal. I think he is saying he is small in every way. He built his fortune on the backs of poor people. It takes a small person to steal. Smaller yet to steal from your own countrymen, even smaller to steal from those of your own faith. And how small do you have to be to steal from poor people? He did it all. So yeah, he was a wee little man. Listen, everybody there believed there was no hope for Zacchaeus. They wouldn't have anything to do with it, as far from God, in their minds at least, as a person could be. Jesus saw it differently. Jesus saw it differently. Jesus saw something that only he could see. He did not see the traitor, the thief, the liar, the swindler, the heretic. He saw the man Zacchaeus could become. Reminds me of the story I heard about the great Willie Mays. Y'all know who Willie Mays is? Any baseball fans? Okay, Willie Mays, Hall of Fame center fielder for the Giants, and everybody knows he had a bazillion home runs. He made these amazing catches on the field. You know, he's famous for his hat flying off and all that stuff. Just an amazing player. What most people don't know is he got off to a horrible start in the majors. He was pitiful. His first week in the majors, he went 0 for 22 at the plate. At one point, his manager, the great Leo DeRocher, also in the Hall of Fame, found Willie Mays in the dugout, head in hands, weeping. DeRocher asked him what was going on, and he said, I don't belong here. I shouldn't be here at all. DeRocher told the story and said he looked at Mays and said, as long as I'm the manager of the Giants, you're my center fielder. He saw something even Willie Mays couldn't see. And he was right. Listen, when Jesus looks at you, which he is right now, he doesn't see what you are right now. He sees the you that he made you to be. I mean, he sees the you that he fashioned, that he has designs for, that he has a plan and a purpose for. If you're still drawing breath, he can still mold you into the person he wants you to become. Don't you ever give up. I mean, he sees the woman, the wife, the mother that he wanted you to be, and not the failures that you've had. And he sees the man, the husband, the father that he made you to be. Listen, maybe everybody else sees you as a lost cause, not Jesus. Maybe you're ready to give up on yourself, not Jesus. The story tells us this, that change is possible, that new life is possible, that we can be different people. And it's possible for you, just like it was possible for Zacchaeus. And it's not because of your potential. It's not because of your great strength. It's not because you'll be super disciplined beyond other people or anything like that. Change is possible because God hasn't given up on you, even if everybody else has. This dude's short, couldn't fight his way through the crowd, runs ahead, climbs a tree. Jesus passes by, looks up, Zacchaeus. He does something that stuns the crowd. He called out Zacchaeus' name. He called out his name. I mean, Jesus knew his name. It's easy to read through this story and, be, the spectacle of the man up in the tree, the little guy trying to fight through the crowd and all that, going to your house, the people. Jesus knew his name. I mean, that's stunning. I mean, if it does something to the human brain to hear your name called out, what in the world would it do to your brain if the eternal Son of God called out your name? I guarantee you his mind was flat out blown that day when Jesus called his name. Jesus knew the name of the worst guy in town. At least that's the way everybody would have seen it. He would have been considered the person least likely to be loved by God or cared for by a religious person. But Jesus makes a point there in front of everybody, publicly, symbolically. He wraps his arm around Zacchaeus and says, Zacchaeus, come down out of the tree. I must go to your house today. This is my mission. I'm going to your house today. That, my friends, is God's love in action, which is a redundancy, because God's love is always action, as should ours be. Second thing I want you to see in the story is this: love has a name, and it's yours. Love has your name. Love has your name. I mean, if God has a smartphone, I just guarantee you that your picture is on the wallpaper of his phone. I've got one wallpaper on mine, and I walked up here without my smartphone. I wanted to have it. But you couldn't see it anyway. I've got this picture. It's me and Wendy and Thomas and Andrew and Benjamin and Ann at a little theater in Midtown Atlanta, and we're sitting at a table. Actually, I'm not in the picture. That's what makes it a good picture. I took the picture, but I keep it on my wallpaper on the phone, so I see it all the time. I've got some others. I've got us sitting in the engine, whatever you call that thing, on a jet at the Delta Museum. I've got us in New York City. I've got pictures of us that have been my wallpaper where we're at the High Museum or at a ball game by a swimming pool in Palmetto, Georgia. Go figure. I don't know. I have these pictures. Do you see a theme? I mean, I love my family. I'm crazy about them. God is crazy about you. He loves you. He knows you inside and out. He knows your name. Yeah, God loves the whole world, true. But be sure this sinks in. God loves you. He loves you. It was love that looked up into that tree. It was love that called out Zacchaeus' name. Zacchaeus, I'm going with today where nobody else in this God-fearing, all-Jewish town is going to go. Nobody else would lower themselves to go there. I'm going to your house today. Love has a name, my friends, and it's yours. But take a long look at this, because this is love. This is Jesus perfectly willing to sacrifice his reputation. Remember, that's a society. It was real big on the idea that you're known by the company you keep. And here's Jesus, once again, keeping company that people didn't approve of. This is Jesus knowingly, intentionally risking great opposition to his ministry to reach a man that everybody else thought was beyond the reach of God. You see, God's love for us, yes, he has affection for you. And yes, he feels, God has said that he feels great love for you, but it's more than mere affection. It is his determined commitment to do what is best for you. It's his constant, unchanging goodwill. Love is always doing what is best for the other, no matter what the cost is. I mean, that's the whole point of John 3:16, right? For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. That's love. May have started with God's affection, but it didn't stop there. Christian love's not just feeling warm, It's way beyond that. And here love has a name. It started with Zacchaeus, but now it's yours. I mean, I know you thought, well, this is a story about Zacchaeus. No, it's not so much. It's a story about you. It really is. I mean, this is a story about you. Jesus knows your name. God calls you by name. God claims you by name. He has you in mind. He knows who you are. And that can be a real comforting idea. Or it can actually be quite intimidating idea to have God call your name. Anybody have parents that every once in a while used your full name? When I heard Randall Allen Barnhart, oh man, I just walked straight over and cut a switch. I didn't know what else was coming. I knew that was coming. I mean, it can be a little intimidating, right? When God calls your name, you can't pretend he's talking to somebody else. Some of you are sitting there pretending right now. Don't lie to yourself. He's calling your name. This is your story. My parents had me in church every Sunday since the day I was born. Slight exaggeration. I think Mama stayed in the hospital a full week or something. I don't know. There's a while. But I mean, right away, I'm in the cradle roll, and then I'm in the primary wing, or whatever they called it back in the olden days. I mean, I was in all these Sunday school and Sunday morning, Wednesday nights, all the special things. They had me in church. I had every opportunity to learn about and love Jesus, the one who loved me. And I knew that he did. Somehow, I managed to choose the wrong path. Every time. I don't know. Some of you are going to think this is hyperbole. And I wish it were. I lived an especially wicked life. I was conniving and manipulative, hateful when I wanted to be, selfish. I had a lot of friends because I knew how to play the game, but I used people, and I loved things. If I were to go into specifics, we would have an emergency meeting of the elders right after church. We're not going to do that. But I know what it is like to be a completely shattered soul. And I know some of you think you still think, you're exaggerating. You're going, Randy, I know you think you got a story. You should have seen me when I was going through a divorce, or what led up to it, or when I was doing drugs, or when I was in prison. I mean, listen, I mean this with all sincerity. You got nothing on me. Nothing. Wish you did. I'm not bragging about how bad I was. I'm saying I was broken. I know what it is like to be a completely wrecked human being. My heart was hard and dark and closed off against anything that was truly godly. If anything was close to Jesus, it made me want it all the less. Then one day, out of the blue, I heard God call my name. And some of you say, wait a minute, I heard your testimony before, and it wasn't about God calling your name. Well, you're right. It wasn't out loud. It wasn't audible. But I'm telling you, it was clear. And it was unmistakable. He called my name. Jesus came looking for me. And if I told you the real story, which I will again someday, not today, I mean, what happened to me was truly stranger than God speaking out loud to me. But suffice it to say, God called my name that day. Like Zacchaeus, I answered his call. Climbed down out of my tree and took Jesus home with me. Maybe you've heard people talk that way before. People who'd struggled in life. And, I have one friend who said to me, not, just a few years ago, he said it's like when he became a believer, the day he was baptized, he said it's like walking out through prison doors free. And he would know. He would know. He said, or it's like owing this tremendous debt. And this is my perspective. Like owing this tremendous debt, and you go to pay it, but you're met with, you know what? Your money's no good here. Debt's been paid. I mean, that's relief. I mean, isn't that great relief? Or some of you say it's like hearing the doctor tell you, after months and months of prayer and treatment and struggle and pain and fear, he looks you in the eye and says, you're cancer-free. I don't know, you're cancer-free. Man, what must that be like? I was watching video on YouTube not long ago, and there was this guy who was defendant in a murder trial, super tense at the end, waiting on the judge to read the verdict. Everybody's quiet, There's a lot of things he has to read, but there were two words they were waiting to hear. The judge said, not guilty. And the guy just melted. I mean, he just melted into the floor, and he wept, and he laughed, and he hugged his family, and then he wept some more. Something like that is what Jesus offered Zacchaeus. And something like that is what he offers you today. Freedom from sin, freedom from shame. I want this for you. And some of you just won't ever quite own up to the need. You're in church, but you've never really felt totally broken, undone by Jesus. To have the freedom to walk out free, you have to start with being broken. I want you to know how deeply loved you are today, because I believe with all of my heart, he's looking for you. He's calling your name. Do you hear it? I mean, do you hear it? Because I can hear it. I can hear him calling your name. He's looking for you. Patrick Morley, in his book Man in the Mirror, tells about a group of fishermen landed in this secluded bay in Alaska, and they, cold, icy, but a great day of fishing salmon. And then when they returned to their seaplane, it was grounded because of the fluctuating tides. I don't know who their pilot was, but it was grounded. And they had no option except to wait till the next morning to fly out. And so they did, and they took off. They got a few feet off the ground, and it just went crashing down into the sea. One of the pontoons, when it was grounded, had ruptured and had filled with water. And, before they know it, this plane starts to sink. 3 men and a 12-year-old boy, young guy. And they all prayed and then jumped in the icy waters to swim to shore. The waters, it was cold. And the riptide was so strong. 2 of the men reached the shore. They were exhausted. They looked back at their companions, and they saw the other man who was the strongest swimmer of the bunch, but he didn't swim to shore. His 12-year-old son couldn't make it. And they saw that father with his arm around his son being swept out to sea. He chose to die with his son rather than to live without him. Let me tell you something. Love has a name. It's your name. And he's calling your name. Jesus chose to die rather than live without you. And what makes that more impressive is he chose to die while we were yet sinners, and we didn't care about him. We didn't want him. We had rejected him. We're still running from him. Listen, if you've never responded to God's love by trusting him with your life, this is the day. Here, right now, we're going to sing a song. You're going to have an opportunity to come forward, and we're going to address this thing. We're going to talk about, what your next step of faith would be. If you're a baptized believer already, God is calling you too. He's calling your name today to take another step of faith. You're already saved, okay, but he wants you to live like it. He wants you to recognize that none of us have arrived. We're all on the way, and he wants to help you take your next step, to live like somebody who has, in fact, been set free. If you've never placed your faith in Jesus' hands, if you've never said, here's my life, Jesus, you take it and run with it. If you've never done that, if you've never really said, Jesus, here's my life, and if you've never handed off to him, then whatever else you have done, you have not believed in him. Not in the biblical sense of belief. It's trust. And if you trust him, you're going to say, here's my life. Take it. It's yours. Believing in God is trusting him with your life. Climb down out of the tree. He's called your name. Answer the call. Let's stand as we sing this morning.